I'm one of many parents and teachers who've been asking you for years to join us in fighting to recover money from these toxic interest rate swap deals. 3 years we've been coming here and being told that our facts are wrong, that we just don't understand, and being dismissed by Mr. Vitale. A full week of Trib headlines tell a very different story. So let's be clear about what happened here. And during the same period that the mayor and this Board of Education were telling us there was nothing we could do about budgets, that we had to close schools and lay off staff, close libraries, increase class sizes, that the only way to expand preschool in the system is to enter into a parking meter deal for preschoolers like my 3-year-old, that while that was happening, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, Loop Capital, and others took $237 million in profits from CPS through these deals. This is according to CPS's numbers, and they're poised to take over $200 million more. Even more cynical, some of these same bankers, Jim Reynolds, the CEO of Loop Capital and a major supporter of the mayor, had the nerve to go out in the public and call on CPS to close schools in order to help fix the budget while taking millions in profits on these deals. Now, we understand that you can't just walk away from these deals, that there's huge penalties tied to these predatory agreements. We get that. We have brought you legal and financial experts, folks who are not neophytes, to use the word of the president of the board, the folks without a conflict of interest, also like him on this question, and people who say that our facts are correct and that you have options here, that the banks failed to disclose the risks associated. The Tribune had Goldman Sachs claiming that there was no downside to agreements that have cost us hundreds of millions. We can file for arbitration. We can file for lawsuit under state law. And most importantly, the Board of Education could take a stand. They could call these banks out, blame them for the cuts and closings that have happened instead of blaming retirees and parents and children who take up too many resources. And they could announce that CPS won't do business with these banks anymore if they refuse to renegotiate. These are real options, and they're just as real as the cuts we've pushed through. We need a Board of Education. This is a board and an administration that likes to talk about I'm wrapping up now. That likes to talk about making tough decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Luskin. Our next speaker, please, is Wendy Canton. Speaker number 32.
I do think this is the tip of the iceberg. 3 years ago, we said these toxic swaps were a problem. $400 million could be saved potentially because the banks did not deal fairly with you. President Vitale, I think you're too heavily involved and should recuse yourself. And this board should reconsider the decision not to act on this matter, bearing the new evidence from the Tribune expose. A couple years ago, CEO Bennett, I think, responded in a meaningful way when I raised this issue and asked Tim Cawley to stand up and answer some questions. At that point, you didn't believe us when we said this was a real issue. You said the banks were upstanding and honorable, and you questioned whether or not we knew what we were talking about. That time is over. You have financial experts from across the country now raising the alarm. This is very serious. It's your duty and obligation to revisit this question and make amends for any mistakes or oversights that may have occurred. It's your duty and obligation.
Were they feeling some heat at the end of the meeting?
Oh yeah, I mean, they're under a lot of heat. The only reason they've come clean is because the Tribune subpoenaed these documents, and under the threat of a court order, they've agreed to be honest and talk through the way these swaps work and the liabilities they've accrued as a result. And now, there's no debate that these are problematic and that the banks shielded themselves from openly disclosing all the facts and being honest brokers. No surprises there, but they've been defending them for years, saying these were good deals, the district benefited. Well, now, lo and behold, at the very minimum, they're on the hook for $100 million than they would have paid otherwise if they'd just done a standard practice. Instead, they went into these complex financial instruments. And beyond that, there's another $300 million they might be able to get back because of the deception of the banks.
Let's go back to what Henry Beenan did say.
I believe it would be very useful, and I know that it was referred to that Mr. Cawley spoke maybe a year or so ago about this, to put out a fact sheet and perhaps even to have a conversation with the Tribune editorial board in order to have, from the point of view of these deals were negotiated some years ago. This is quite apart from the issue of whether there's a legal basis to challenge banks or whether one should go into arbitration, which are a different set of issues.
He said he wanted a fact sheet from the board so they could defend themselves. Can you go into that?
Well, yeah, that's a real troubling. Henry
question.
Beenan, a board member from Northwestern University, said that, well, you know, in response to the arguments and concerns raised about swaps and the losses CPS has accrued, we should do fact sheets and meet with the Tribune editorial board, not to come clean and come to terms with the realities of these things and whether or not we have the opportunity to get the money back for children. But no, like, how do we do a spin campaign to assert that, you know, our position was correct all along? That's what I heard. And so that's very disappointing. But, you know, I raised the question from the audience, would they consider legal action, and they didn't rule it out. So let's hope through some clear thinking and cogent rationalization, they'll do the right thing.
I'm here today with community leaders and organizations from across the city. Groups like Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, Northside Action for Justice, Pilsen Alliance, Communities United, and Chicago Teachers Union. We're here today to demand that Chicago Public Schools and Mayor Emanuel take action to stand with parents and students, not with Wall Street bankers. We're here today to demand an elected representative school board.
That's right. I am disappointed that this board chooses to ignore the Bronzeville community and call for a request for proposals from private contractors for Dyer High School in 2016. This is preposterous. We are taxpayers and deserve that our tax dollars be used to fund a traditional neighborhood high school for the Bronzeville community. We have been crystal clear about what we want: the Dyer Global Leadership and Green Technology High School in 2015. 60 years ago, the Supreme Court in Brown versus Board of Education firmly established the right to equal opportunity and equity of resources in America's schools. Now, in 2014, CPS has manipulated data to make charter schools appear to be higher performing than community schools. They choose to close and destabilize neighborhood schools to put children in low-performing charter schools. Yeah. This is why I support a referendum for an elected representative school board to pressure the Illinois legislature, who must change the law to allow Chicagoans the same right the residents of every other city and town in the state enjoy: the right to elect the people who run Chicago public schools. Thank you.
Just want everybody to think just for a second about the issue of conflict of interest. Here we have an appointed school board. The president of the school board is a banker, right? Not that I'm saying anything shady's going on here, but the president of the school board is a banker. They made some horribly bad deals that have cost our schools and our children right now $200 million. By the time it's done, it's going to be over $400 million. Their decisions have had real consequences for our schools and our children. They closed down in our community Stewart Elementary School, saying they didn't have the money to keep it open. They moved children from Stewart to Brenneman. A lot of these children had special needs. Those children lost at least a year because Brenneman did not have the resources to have the aides that they needed in the classroom, the special education teachers that they needed, and now are falling further and further behind. This is the real life consequences of the decision that this appointed board has made.
Parents and community members, teachers, and others across this city collected over 66,000 signatures to get elected school board on the ballot around the city. This is a historic moment, and this Board of Education appointed by the mayor could not be working harder to make it clear why we need an elected school board. When bankers and billionaires run the Board of Education, they've made it clear time and time again what their priority is going to be. Their priority is protecting their banker friends, not fighting for our students. They like to say they're not guaranteed that they could win the money back from these banks. But what was the guarantee that things were going to get better when they closed 50 schools across this city? When they tried to take from seniors and retirees? They've been willing to bend over backwards when it's to take from working people, to take from students, and take from our communities. We need a Board of Education that's going to put our children first and be willing to fight for the resources that we need in these schools. So we need them to stand up to the banks and demand this money back, and we need the people of the city of Chicago to come together and fight for this elected school board in these elections. Thank you.